So hi, Jeff. Good to see you again.
Fabulous to be here.
Great. Um, you and I were recently talking about interesting concept that I'm going to admit right off that I don't have a full understanding of. That's something called social capital. You know, we talk about capital in so many different ways. The easiest, most obvious, low-hanging fruit around capital is financial money. Whether it's revenues or expenses or margins that we increase in order to have profits. But we all know that there are physical capital that companies have, for example, various kinds of assets, be it plant or otherwise, trucks, equipment. And then there's the human capital, which is not necessarily a phrase that I particularly like, relegating humans into a category that is associated with money. And I think that's the misunderstanding that I am also bringing to this discussion, and that is that it's only about money. It's also about talent and people and so on and so forth. But this is more your arena, more things that you work on. You do a fair amount of research in, and so on and so forth. So why don't we start with the obvious question? So what is social capital?
And it's a very interesting question because it's one of those ideas that's becoming more and more prevalent in the social sciences. And when it becomes more and more prevalent in the social sciences, it becomes less and less easy to find a cohesive, agreed upon, homogeneous definition, right? To say, okay, this is it, and everybody agrees to what this is. So if you look at it, that's a great way to answer a political question. The answer is capital is tools, as an extension of what we talked about last week, capital being one of the part of the decalogue of preparedness is capitals are tools that exist that we use in our journey through life. You said physical capital is one, possessions, the pen in your hand, the chair that you're sitting on, they all have a purpose, right? And you own them and you can transfer ownership, etc. Human capital, I'm okay with that phrase because when I say human capital, I mean education and knowledge, not the human themselves, but the education and knowledge that they possess that we may have a propensity to pass between ourselves.
Yeah.
And then financial capital is well known. Those are capital financial assets that come in many different things, and we all have physical assets. So the term social capital is meant to capture the nature of our pro-social behavior as animals. We are a gregarious species. We need relationships to be successful. Back to what we talked about last week, the lone wolf does not succeed in nature. Very few species do it that way. Some do, but the vast majority do not. We as humans require positive relationships to be successful in life. And so social capital is a way of bringing together the structure of that human relationship and to understand the value that relationships to other humans matter and how it affects our being. And so what it comes to is really when we look for indicators of social capital, we look at people's predispositions. Everybody's going to be somewhat different about how open they are to creating new relationships, right? Everybody has a existing predisposition. We also have a level of connectedness. Some of us are very well connected. Some of us are less connected. Some of us have tighter networks and some don't. And if you think about your networks, it kind of works in three general concentric circles. One, we consider your bonding social capital. That is your very tight, homogeneous group of people, right? So that would be people with a PhD who run their own companies. You belong to a very small club. It is also the people that you traditionally, the colloquial phrase, who do you call at 3 a.m, who's actually going to answer the phone and grab a shovel because they're assuming you're burying somebody, that kind of tight group of family and friends. That's your bonding social capital. But we then have bridging. So these are your relationships with other networks. So I'm a member of a faith organization. I go to a church every Sunday. and I belong to a community gardening association. I am a bridge between those two organizations. Most members are not common to each, but I become a bridge. So as we start to explain social capital in that sense, it looks at it through the traditional lens of networks. So if you can visualize everybody you know connected to everybody they know, and then map that in a 2D or 3D model, you start to look at societal relationships. And so in a general sense, social capital is about understanding the value and importance of the human relationships, the connectedness, our predispositions, and the value of trusted relationships that are based upon norms of reciprocity that exist, right? So and the one aspect that really helps people understand is we often call social capital the glue and the lubricant of society. It's the glue that holds us together because we take care of each other, but it's the lubricant. And what that means by that is it's social capital establishes the network on which other capitals may flow. My financial capital will not flow to you unless we have first established a trusted relationship. I'm not loaning you money. You're not loaning me money just because I knocked at your door and asked for it. The same with physical goods. Your neighbor you're aware of 3 apartments down that you've known for 20 years comes to your door looking for something versus somebody who says they're from the 6th floor, but you don't really remember them. You're not going to loan your physical capital in the same manner between those two people. The flow and the ease of that physical capital is based upon the strength of that trusted relationship, which has to be in first. The same with human education and knowledge transfer. So the idea behind studying the power and the strength of social capital is, if I understand it correctly, and if I can notice it and I can figure out ways to foster it and grow social capital, then I'm going by default to make financial capital, human capital, physical capital flow easier with less disturbance and a higher degree of trust, which, as we know, in industry, not just in personal friend groups and relationship, but in industry, when you have trusted networks between companies, when you have trusted exchange, you have greater flow of information, greater flow of capital, right? We sign a 3PL agreement for logistics partnerships, but when that's built upon trust, we spend far less time looking at contractual terms and far more time building relationships.
Yeah.
So that's the theory that I've been working on for probably about 7 or 8 years now in total.
Okay. Interesting. In one of the sessions that I did some research on that, for the Logistics Institute as part of our strategic leadership program, is we were looking at pursuit of excellence, supply chain and logistics. What is the pursuit of excellence, and why do you need to pursue it? So on the one hand, there are the external forces to mirror one approach to competition, a competitive advantage. The other is resource-based. The question is, what makes your company unique? And the focus, and this goes back to the research, it goes back to the 1990s, early 2000. The focus is on 3 dimensions of capital, right? Obviously, the revenue, finance, just as you were describing it. The other is on physical assets that any company would have, and then the third is the human capital. And what's fascinating is in answering the question, the uniqueness of the organization, it's a combination of things. There's the stuff you have inside the 4 walls. This is yours, right? Nobody else has those. But the critical side of all that, what's inside the 4 walls, somewhat can be replicated and probably even superseded by those who have the capital, financials, in order to either mimic what you do or to do it better. So the physical side of your capital capability is strong, but also somewhat limited. It's strong within a time constraint, because at some time, at some point, possibly going into the future, someone's going to scoop you.
Yeah.
As simple as that. But the real focal point or focus on the uniqueness is that human capital. And you help me understand human capital, because as I said earlier, I don't like referring to people as assets.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that most of the literature nowadays doesn't refer to people as assets. That's kind of an insult, to say the least. But as you described capital, it's the education, it's the knowledge, it's the experience, it's the talent, it's the skills, right? And from the point of view of the pursuit of excellence and the uniqueness of the company, it's also its history.
Yeah.
You know, this is something that often enough we forget. All companies, all organizations have a history.
Mhm.
They all started at some point. They started at a point before which it did not exist. Okay. After which it grew, especially if it's still around. You know, I think of, I'm a historian by training and by, you know, as my focal point in life. I like asking questions. Where did it come from? I don't like asking questions. A typical historian would ask, when did it start? I'm not really interested. I want to know where it came from and how did it move? You know, there's a whole notion of time. It says, you know, there's the past, there's the present, there's the future. But those are all concepts. We can actually ask a very serious question. Is time real? Or is time an idea? But that's a whole other discussion.
That's a different podcast episode.
It's a different thought pattern we can talk about at some other time. But when we think of social capital and add to it human capital as a dimension of social capital, we do talk about, you know, each of us as individuals. Well, where did we come from? We all came from families. We were all born at some time. We were all born in a location. We were all born in a historic moment. I am definitely a baby boomer. All right. My mother and father got married during the war. Someone could ask the question, which war?
Which war?
Okay. There's been so many. And I'll just leave it at World War II. So let's be careful here. They didn't get married during the American Civil War. Or the War of the Roses, to make it even worse.
I was just going to say Napoleonic, but okay.
Yeah. Let's be careful here. I'm not that old, but at the same time, my perspective on things is very different from other people's perspective. As a matter of fact, I'd like to get your insights into this. Jasmine here in the office and I were just talking about the fact that we are actually, among ourselves as a team, 3 different generations of people who have an interface with technology, communication technology, IT. For me, it's an annoyance. Okay, there it is, but I can get through it. For her, and for her, it's a convenience up to a point. For the younger people that we hired recently, they actually have difficulties with the way technology is presented at this time. They are apps oriented. Jasmine and I are, you know, the Microsoft problem solving, know how to use the technology. We actually have to think through the rational step-by-step approach to, say, doing Word or PowerPoint or anything. Whereas younger people who are younger than both of us, especially me, it's an app. And That's a different cultural dimension, because an app is straightforward. Just all you do is use the app.
Yep.
Well, what does that do to the thinking process of an individual who now is dependent on an external medium in order to do things? Whereas for me, it's problem solving. For Jasmine, it's process solving. And for younger people, it's just hit the right app.
Well, they're leveraging the technology that exists to execute a task, right? So they're not trying to use the technology like you and I use Word to create a document for a purpose.
Yes.
They just create a document.
Yes.
And it's a different frame. Like there, when you and I see this with my 25-year-old son and my 22-year-old son. They just live in a world of technology, right?
Yes.
You can pick up a microphone as we are today. You can read off a letter into an app. You can send it to another app who will put
Yes.
it into perfect prose
Yes.
and organize it correctly, and another app will mail it out for you.
Yes. Right.
We look at that as what a neat way to simplify work. They look at it as that's how work is done.
That's right. That is
Because
the
they
work.
don't have another frame.
That's right.
They don't have a
Right.
previous frame.
Yes.
And
Yes.
really this linking it to social capital, some of the Professor Robert Putnam out of the United States was really started this modern level study into social capital when he wrote a book, Bowling Alone. So he did a study in the 50s, 60s, and 70s on membership, looking for membership of society and community organizations, which we use in the theory and in the science as a measure of connectedness.
Yeah.
And so he called it Bowling Alone,
Yes.
the title of his book, because people are starting to bowl alone. They're not joining bowling leagues anymore.
Yes.
They're not joining choirs. They're not. Now, this may date it a little bit by his data, but you can move that to the modern society. People are not joining clubs and organizations and common spaces for people to meet, gather, and do activities in person. That is on a significant decline in society. So when we look for communities and areas that have a high value of social capital, and for those academic nerds out there, no, it's not measurable in like 6.1 out of 10 and that kind of scoring. Everybody wants to know, what's my social capital score? It's like, what's my resilience score? I'm sorry, but that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
But when we look for indicators, because the best way to measure social capital in an organization or in the public in general is outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
What are the outcomes of high levels of social capital? So you're not searching for the high level, you're searching for the outcomes that would indicate the presence of high level. So it's kind of how you have to do that investigative work. And when you're looking at that, it's high membership in clubs and organizations.
Yeah.
Professor Aldrich out of Northeastern University in Boston has started a great line of inquiry on social infrastructure.
Yeah.
So measuring the quantity, density, and the use of public parks, public swimming pools, hair salons, barber salons, nail salons, and other things that demonstrate a high level of community commitment and organization.
Yeah.
And so when we see that, we're able to look at society is becoming ever greater connected because of the tools you and I are using right now, but ever so disconnected at the very same time.
Yes. Yeah.
And there will be, and
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody to really put a good argument on when, but there is going to be a point where there's going to be a backlash on that. And I don't know when and where that is, but at this right now, we are marching towards being lone wolves
Yeah.
as a society,
Yeah.
going against what 100,000 years of species Darwin processes have led us to understand. We're moving away from it. We're ever so connected. And you can see that in the states of anxiety levels and mental health issues and challenges in the population are a direct result. And some scientists argue this, and I'm not a psychology expert, so I won't profess to say they're correct or not, but to say our lack of grouping together in common groups and activities is directly correlated to the increase in mental health challenges in society. Because people who are well connected, well socialized, have lower degrees of mental health injury. It's just the statistics and trying to draw the line. So when you look at social capital and its value, understanding its value is, I look at it as a differentiator, just like you were outlining in logistics. It's a differentiator. So if we're all running a firm, competing firms similar in the industry, we're freight forwarders, right? There's only so many ways you can dance around that issue. You're a freight forwarder, or you're not working out of the city of Toronto, right? Okay. What's my differentiator? Well, it could be price, it could be value, it could be service, or it could be my people. And the organizations that say my people are number one, but actually invest in social capital, are the ones that have lower turnover.
Yes.
People are dedicated, loyal to places where they have a sense of belonging. They're respected, they're acknowledged, they're thanked. And these are all building trusted norms of relationship. And it's why we see weird cases where great employees are going down with the ship, because the ship is a fantastic place to be.
Yeah.
And they have a sense of belonging and a sense of trust. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of great relationships to great correlations to strong social capital and better post-disaster outcomes as well.
Yeah. Interesting, among all of a number of the concepts that we're throwing back and forth here, some of this is not new. A lot of it has been around for quite some time. The whole experience of, if you want to call it that, of alienation in a social context has been around a long time, where people do not feel connected or part of the social situation. Whether it's because they isolate, or, the psychology of it, are you an introvert versus, okay, fine. Yeah. By the way, I love to refer to myself as an introverted extrovert, or an extroverted introvert, depending on the time of the day.
Yep.
One of the things that I have been exploring in my own life, as well as we talk about various things, is this whole thing of aloneness versus loneliness.
Yeah.
Many people live alone, but they're not necessarily lonely.
Nope.
All right. And there are lots of people who have networks that are quite, including very, very personal ones, that bonding kind of network, who are actually, feeling senses of isolation and not belonging, despite the fact that they're part of a group. And it gets me back to some of the ideas that we've been talking about. These are life choices. You use the phrase life. What is it? Lifestyle.
Lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to use that, because it reminds me of the hat that I want to buy or not buy, or the coat and something that. But I'm being obviously facetious about it. But it's the way of life, and some people feel, not necessarily me, that they're in a position where they can't go and network, they can't reach out. A city like New York is famous for having 8 million alienated people who don't really talk to each other.
Yeah.
And they're all afraid of each other. Well, if you don't talk to each other and you don't know who your neighbors are, you actually become fearsome. You're fearful. Never mind fearsome. You just don't, relate. But then you're also afraid of everybody around you. And one of the most famous lines coming out of a movie, Fisher King, is as they're climbing up the side of the mansion in order to steal the cup. The line is, "Good thing this is New York, because nobody in New York looks up."
Just the tourists. Yeah.
Well, even then, especially at night, so
Yeah.
nobody looks up. So you can do anything you want above a certain level, because nobody's going to look at you or find you and so it gets to this whole psychosocial issue of alienation. Yet, even in the whole arena of technology, information technology, I see what's emerging is the diminishment or the reduction in membership and the increase in bowling alone, even as you connect to 1.5 million followers.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It reinforces that being alone,
Yeah.
actually. There was a time, and maybe I'm giving my age slightly more away, where there were chat groups.
Yep.
You don't see chat groups anymore. You see Instagram feeds and likes and dislikes and emojis and whatever. And in our team meeting today, I actually learned something that different emojis mean a different level of connectivity. And I went, what? Whether you like something, or whether you really like something, whether there's a whole hierarchy. Whether you do this, or you do this, or you use a heart, or you use this with a heart. Each one is a communication at a different level. I know
Totally different language.
it's a different language. I
Yeah.
know I'm old, but I thought, holy, I didn't know that. And it just blew me away. But this is how people communicate whilst maintaining aloneness, potentially isolation.
Yes. They're not connected. The fact that they communicate exists, and the platform allows people to communicate far easier and with far greater number of people, but they're not connected. There isn't a sense of trust, a norm of reciprocity. It's like in business, you and I do not enter business with somebody we don't trust.
No.
That's just a general principle.
Oh,
you wouldn't, right?
No.
But what social capital does is it puts a theoretical frame. I call it a lifestyle because I don't want to call it we're talking about the theoretical lens or the theoretical frame. It's just gobbledygook to most people, as it should be. But the idea being is that it puts a concept to the idea that there is a power vested in positive human relationships that may be leveraged to improve your access to human capital, financial capital, physical capital, and the rest of the world. So your human relationships are your key gateway, are your strength to going, which is why well-connected people do very well.
Yeah.
And when I mean well-connected, I always tell people there's a huge difference. The difference between knowing somebody and having an acquaintance is, do you have their phone number?
Yeah.
Or would you know them by first name in the shopping mall when you saw them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I talk about in business, like
Yeah.
I'm connected with a lot of people in the preparedness world. That's fantastic. How many of them would I recognize in person in the mall and stop and talk to them in person? There's a sense of connectedness that's important there. And people are becoming very, very isolated because they're getting the impression that having this type of connection on Zoom is connected and building a strong friendship, and et cetera, like, because you just connect on Zoom, because it allows you to do things without doing the uncomfortable thing.
Yeah.
Right. Because the uncomfortable thing is getting dressed, going out of your house, going to a different place, sitting down, meeting somebody. They may show, they may be late, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example of aging. I was in a store a couple of days ago here in Ottawa, a board game store.
Oh.
And this was a uber level board game. Like they had some one-off titles that were several $100s for a board game.
Yep. Yep.
I remember a time when when a group of friends getting together for a board game was something that was normalized. Right? That transformed into your chat group. We had the same conversations. It just wasn't over a board game. It was over a chat group. Now we have it over Instagram feeds or Zoom calls or FaceTime calls, and none of us actually have to physically get together. And there's a couple of really great researchers looking at the fact that there are real and measurable physiological changes in the human animal when we are physically close to each other
Yeah.
that are not seen and not measured when
Yeah.
we connect over technology.
Yeah.
We are designed to be in groups physically together for
Yeah.
reasonable lengths of time.
Yeah.
And we are losing out on some of the natural strengths within the humanity by choosing just this as a strategy.
Yeah. Board games or games at what would be a super level, fascinating. I think of, and I'm not a player, Mario Brothers and so on. I don't do online games, but I think of Dungeons and Dragons. It's been around for a while, Dungeons and Dragons. Never mind, all the other ones, Grand Theft Auto and so on and so on.
I
All
was
of them have.
playing D&D when I was 18 and
Oh,
16.
okay. Well, that goes to show how old it is.
Yeah.
Not you. I just said the game.
Oh, I know.
But what's fascinating about those and how now this would be a great study, and not because I'm an academic, because I'm curious.
Yeah.
And that is, what is the evolution of the playing dynamics in a D&D, right? There used to be chats where the players would communicate with each other. I don't think they do that anymore. I think the communication is in the play.
Well, I can throw you some perfect insight on that one. My
Okay.
son is an online dungeon master.
Okay.
And he runs it out of the basement of our house, and he runs an online game he has 8 people that show up at a certain time,
Yeah.
and they play the game Dungeons and Dragons completely online, and they have the ability to go into private conversation. There's a site that you buy a membership in, and they use that site, and it has a private chat rooms for the players to get outside of the earshot
Okay.
of the dungeon master to have those communications. Like, they're all on mics, they're all on camera. And they use they use one program for the map and the game itself. Then they use another program for the audio chats and video. And then the dungeon master does this. So I listen to it because I used to play the game in person with pieces of paper and dice.
Mm-hmm.
They play it now with a online character, but they still use the physical dice to roll.
Ah, interesting.
And the game itself remains the same. The platform has changed.
Ah.
And so this group does periodically get together once a quarter or so to actually play around in person.
Okay.
So the dynamics are actually pretty close in that game, in that example. But it's the nature of D&D, and it's the nature of how the game is played that you need to have those type of interactions. When I used to play it, we used to go on canoe trips and bring our D&D game. So we canoe all day into the backcountry. You're about 100 kilometers away from anybody else. Set up a campsite, build a big campfire, and we play D&D around the campfire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're doing it with a simulated campfire, et cetera, right? So they do still get together. The one thing that it has done is it's kept alive things that were dying, like bowling leagues.
Yes.
Right? Like, you can't have a bowling league online, but you can have a D&D online.
Okay.
So some previous activities are surviving through technology.
Yeah.
And some are being sunsetted, let's call it that,
Yeah.
by technology.
Okay. Well, it gets back to the 3 dimensions of connectedness that you introduced. There is the club, the bonding, right? And as that American professor noted that, bowling, in his book Bowling Alone, clubs and memberships are not necessarily face-to-face physical in the same room. It doesn't mean just the way you described the private chat room inside of D&D. It is a bonding group, right? It is a club, right?
Yep.
It's so that's where technology is replacing the physical bowling alley, if you will, where the league comes together to work itself out in terms of competition with, and now becomes online, not necessarily that messy side of touching germ-ridden equipment, yet at the same time being able to work or play together as a specific group of people who are now in a league. It almost seems to be, and this is a total left wing on the left wing, it's a off the wall concept. As I was observing young people, and I'm not talking in any particular generation, whether it's millennial or otherwise, I noticed that there had been an emerging, I'll call it a fetish. It's kind of an unfair use of the term, unfair to call people in fetishes, where they became germaphobes. That Purell market just shot through the ceiling because everybody was buying Purell, and I still watch people doing the before they even touched a utensil, and I go, okay, folks, I think you're bringing your anti-germ fears or your germ fears just a little too far. You need to encounter germs, not be completely hermetically sealed from germs so that you build immunities. That's what immunization means. All right.
Kind of how the species works.
Yeah, it's how the animal works. This is
Yeah.
who we are. But I still find that the emergence of a club in D&D as a private chat room with a dungeon master and so on and so forth, doesn't matter who's in charge so much as who's inside.
Yep.
And what is the physical context of being inside? It's all online, with the occasional trips on let's get together and go up to a cabin somewhere and do weird things. One almost wants to do an analysis of current culture. What is the zombie apocalypse other than maybe germs having taken over, and that people's fear about germs has now become so super that we're afraid that we're going to get our brains eaten. Sorry, my brain's so old, it's not going to bother.
Not worried about the fungus taking it out, but I mean, you have to think about, when you look at that pro-social, that there is a negative side to social capital. There is a negative social capital out there, and it's by exclusionary nature. Membership excludes.
Yes.
So on most part, that doesn't mean we become mean and evil.
No.
But when there's limited resources and limited benefit, and I have certain capital, other capitals to share amongst people I have strong social capital with, those capitals tend to stay within my network and within my membership group. Yeah. So, for example, I could have the benefits of being a member of the Baptist church are wonderful. You don't get those benefits if you're not a member of the Baptist church.
That's right.
So there are exclusionary. Plus, you have to remember, the Hells Angels of Toronto have really strong social capital.
Oh,
right? So social capital is not this grandiose idea that is only for serving the good and humanity.
No.
There is all kinds of the Hells Angels are just a prime example of, and clubs such as that, and professions, for example. If you are a practicing lawyer and admitted to the bar, you have certain privileges that are not afforded to people who are not part of your membership. And there are certain things that are not shared outside of things. So one of the things that we like to remind folks when we talk about social capital, and everybody's going, let's build these wonderful relationships ever, is okay. but understand that there are negative aspects of putting everybody in groups, which is part of the social capital. Some of the studies bleed into what I like to call the ideological warfare that's happening in today's society, in that we're trying to place every human in some identifiable group. And by doing that, we're by definition, excluding others. And that's a very dangerous practice. But our technology connects people to the extent that we never connected before.
Yes.
My argument is we're running into a big trouble because we're replacing traditional connectedness, not amplifying it with the new thing. How often, I mean, we still do this in youth sports. We put our young children into sports and community organizations, scouts, Girl Guides, whatever it may be. I'm sure they're going to learn some cool skills, but what they're really doing is learning how to be a good human animal in a collective society, how to negotiate, how to problem solve, how to work how to gain emotional intelligence and emotional control. These are all lessons that are taught at a young age. And when properly mentored, you create a bunch of humans who are probably a good job of taking care of themselves and each other. When we fail to put people through that system, you get adults nowadays, and I'm going to go down a tangent. You get adults nowadays who don't understand emotional regulation and pro-social behavior. And it becomes individualistic. And now you start having a breakdown of collective responsibility, et cetera. And so every time we exclude the need to get together in physical form for extended periods of time with other like-minded people, we lose out on the benefits that offers us everywhere else.
It's that, okay. When we talk about, let's say, clubs, they're the insiders and the outsiders. Okay. And this almost comes down to the difference, looking at the difference between a survivalist and someone who's focusing on a preparedness strategy. A survivalist is about insider clubs. This is us. Everybody else out there is not us. It's as simple as it's not us. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is everybody out there is the enemy. Now that's bringing it to an extreme, but nobody can be trusted who is not inside, who is not us. And that's a mentality and a mindset. I'm not going to call it a mentality. I'll call it a mindset that is divisive. Whether it works itself out as a divisiveness in politics or just social awareness or social acceptance or whatever. There's that insider, I'm me, the rest of you aren't me. Okay, there's a certain logic that's kind of obvious. You aren't me. And as I say to a lot of people, you should be happy you're not me. But that's a different issue. It's when we take that you're not me and make it into the strategy, if you wish, or the way, the lifestyle that I choose. Now we're getting into difficulties. And it isn't just social difficulties. It's the difficulties I'm creating for myself. Because my isolationist insider idea cuts me off from the possibility of working with, being saved by people who are not me in the event of an emergency. The misunderstanding is that I could go it alone, when in reality, it's something that I call, we need people muscles. And I don't mean personal muscles, I mean people muscles. We have to surround ourselves with people whom we can, whom we are directly responsible for. So there's a whole level of responsibility there, but whom we need in the event that we need okay, we could say in an emergency situation, we need all kinds of help. What I'm actually saying is in a non-emergency situation, in so-called normal, we need an entire network within the social fabric so that we can eat. All right, we can turn the lights on.
Yeah.
Okay, we can have an exchange in money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, and so there is a dimension to the social capital that is the need for bridges and networks. All right, the three things you introduced of there's the club, the bridge, and the network. Okay. All right. The club is what we think we can survive with. All right. For some of us, it's our only focus, and that's a form of alienation that I think people should look at more closely, especially if you want to go the survivalist approach to preparedness, which is really isolationism. The bridge, I like that term, bridge. It's getting outside of the club and recognizing that there are others. It's almost like three concentric circles: the club, the bridge to others, whether it's people or systems or infrastructures or whatever, and then the network, which is even bigger. Not only is that for me survival, but that's also about success, whether it's personal success, professional success, business success. We cannot be successful alone. We may think we're successful in the small circle, but that's a pretty narrow success. It's just me and myself. Yeah.
It is when you look at when we look at the demographics that are the most successful and better post-event outcomes when there's significant disasters, and some of the research has gone back and really looked at the Japanese are fabulous for keeping records of everything that ever happens to them, right? And it's just the nature of their culture.
Yeah.
So when you look at what's happened in Japanese prefectures during disasters and mostly earthquakes that have befallen that area in the Ring of Fire, and the same thing has been happening. It's well-connected communities. So it's not financial influence. We think if you have a disaster in New Orleans or these hurricanes that just recently hit in the last couple of days in Florida, right? Okay. Who's going to come out on top in that? The first thing is, oh, it's always the rich people. Well, no, the data tells you otherwise. It is the well-connected communities. And if you look at the socioeconomic levels, it is one step above welfare. So it is the politically incorrect terminology I use is the working poor. Because look at your park on Sunday. What communities are out there in force? They're well connected. They're having a community cookout on Sundays. They're all leaning on each other. They're all contributing. They all have access to each other's resources. That is the most powerful network out there. And that is the network that has consistently shown to have better post-event outcomes, not the one with money, not the person who builds the bunker underneath their building, because man, you better like your family if you're going to lock yourself in there with just your family for a long period of time, right? But when we look at what actually is correlated to better outcomes and better quality of life and people who have less stress. Remember I said positive social capital, you measure outcomes. So we measure happiness scores, we measure success, we measure mental health levels, stress levels, indebtedness levels, all of these other membership levels. And they all speak to those that have big networks, and strong networks are ones that have better quality of life, et cetera. It's like you and I are connected over a trusted relationship. I now have access to your network. And you have access to the resources embedded in my network because of our relationship.
Yeah. Yes.
If that relationship didn't exist, we could have a transactional relationship for business.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But access to those resources embedded in your network would not be part of that relationship.
Yeah.
which is why when I push the message of preparedness, I keep telling people, and I had this comment on one of my videos 2 days ago, that my neighbor is my number one enemy. That's what one person commented on it when I talked about your neighbor being the single greatest asset you have in an emergency. They're the ones who are going to be knocking on your door at 3 a.m. to say the roof is on fire. They're the ones who are going to pull you out of the wreckage of your earthquake fallen home. They're the ones who are going to house you, feed you, water you, take care of you when significant events happen. And this individual was of the belief that everybody but him is a threat. And I tried to persuade him, but at a certain point you can't persuade individuals. But that's the ideology of you're on your own.
Yeah.
And when the bad day comes, if people didn't plan, they're going to come take your resources. So you better be prepared to defend your resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy smokes. Whatever happened to the idea of connectedness, shared value, shared communities? Just look at some of the communities out in Western Canada that are responding to evacuations. What do? When 100 people show up in their community who have just been evacuated from home, they don't lock their doors.
No. Yeah.
Right? We don't, that's not, we open our doors. We help. Look at, I mean, the best example is God Love the Newfoundlanders. Hey, look at Gander after 9/11.
Yes.
Come from away play, right?
Come from away.
They could have locked their doors and kept them all on the floor of the airport for a couple of weeks and fed them hot dogs. But that's not what the people of Gander did. That's because the people of Gander have strong social capital.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And it demonstrates in how you operate. So if you want a strong organization, you have to have strong social capital. So part of our study and part of the work that we're doing is, how do you know that?
Yeah.
How do you test it?
Yeah.
What can I do to improve the social capital in my organization? Right? What do people look for? Right? When you make arbitrary decisions on policy because you think it's right, but you don't realize the secondary and tertiary impact that has on the rest of the community or the rest of your office space. You know, what's the loyalty of your people? Do they stick around when it gets a little rough? Do they stick around, or are they gone in a revolving door the second there's a little crack in the frame?
Yeah. Do they put their fingers in the crack in the dike, or do they just watch it disintegrate in front of you?
Yeah.
Right. I find maybe I just have a strong sense of irony. Or maybe I just, at this stage of my life, like to laugh a lot, especially about things that people would say, that's a serious issue. Yeah, okay. There are lots of serious issues. I always find it fascinating, this mental model we have about the wealthy, people with lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
Not that I'm one of them, hardly. And we have this sense that they have it all. And the best part is they live in peace and they're all secure. I think that the ironic side of all this is I think they live with an awful lot of fear. And not just the fear of not making more money, that's bad enough, but maintaining the level of, I don't know, resources that they have. And by that, I mean, it's almost as if the more you have, the more you are afraid. I'll give the example of twice now in the last few days, I've spoken with people who are looking at security measures around automobile theft, the extra measures that go beyond the GPS. Right? And I was just talking to one of my friends here in the building where the office is located, and his truck was stolen. And he said, I know exactly where it is. Why? The GPS is still working. As a matter of fact, the GPS goes on every time somebody gets in and starts the engine, and it's somewhere in the Middle East. Okay, and North America is becoming infamous actually as a target for stolen vehicles, especially high-end ones. And I've talked to some friends, and they've developed a new security method as an add-on to Bentleys and Rolls Royces. Now we're talking, a vehicle that's 250 to $300,000 per vehicle at the low end.
Yeah,
Okay,
at the very
so
low end.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's just the ordinary everyday Bentley, and so there are people who buy these things. Obviously, they have the money and they want to enjoy the use of that money. Notice I'm not talking about conspicuous consumption. People have a right to enjoy the wealth that they have worked towards. Um, we can be cynical about it, saying that people who have great wealth actually inherited it. They never did anything a day in their lives. Okay, fine, but park that somewhere else. I'm not interested in that. People do work hard. People do earn money. People do have accumulated wealth, and therefore they go out and they buy, comfort, potentially security. But the story that we were exchanging, this three of us, around automobile security just last week, was around this fellow went in to buy his third Rolls Royce. Why? Because this is theft season. I said, excuse me? His past two, the other two had been stolen. I said, oh, okay. We know that these things happen, and yes, there is an increase in all of that. But there's a side of me that says, can you imagine facing the fear, constant fear, of having a vehicle that is a target to disappear on you overnight, even if you have it in your garage? That would raise the fear level even higher if it's inside my secure garage and someone has driven it off my premise. I go, how the hell did they get into my garage? What is security? How do I keep myself and my family safe? All right. So our misconceptions about what constitutes safety and security are often enough focused on such things as the monetary capability, the financial capability of building a wall around your house. When in reality, it's really, do you know your neighbors? Um,
And
okay.
they often say that man's adherence to the moral code is directly correlated to his access to resources. So, and we have a potential gap in society where those that have lower access to resources, if they don't have enough food to eat, they're going to go take the food. Now, that's not a question of taking a Rolls Royce. That's a different question altogether. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
get it. My spouse manages a security company. Their
Mhm.
growth is exponential in people putting home security systems in,
Totally.
because the number of break-ins, because when you have a low access to resources, people start to see the ability to take things. And also there's, you also have to look at, this is a function of technology. You used to have a key, stick it in, turn the ignition, and
Yeah.
go,
Yeah.
right? Now I can just hold this wire thing up at
Yes.
the front door you see,
Yeah.
pretend to be your key fob and take your car. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know why that is the fault of the owner.
No.
If that's possible,
Yes.
I would turn around and say, Toyota, who gets stolen all the time,
Yes.
you must now immediately implement a prevention that does not allow people
That's right.
to mirror the fob.
Yep.
And you have 30 days to implement that technology, or
Yeah.
you'll be held financially responsible for this.
Yes.
You
Yes.
make a rule like that, I guarantee you the problem's fixed in 30 days,
Exactly.
right?
And
But it's burdened off to insurance.
Exactly.
Risk transfer.
Yes, it's risk transfer. It's fascinating because the two gentlemen I was talking to have invented the anti-fob capability. It's a very small little thing that you put into, you set it up, and it's all done electronically, IT. But this item you carry with you. You don't, or you, yes, you carry with you. Of course, now there's the struggle over where do you carry it? Do you attach it to your keys to your car, which includes the fob to your car? And I said, no, that's kind of counterintuitive. I mean, yeah, it's ease of carrying, but I hate to tell you folks, once the car is gone or whatever, unless you retain the keys with the fob, the original fob, sorry, it's, you ain't achieving nothing. It's as simple as that.
No.
But the issue is, who is to be held responsible? And insofar as it's, risk is mitigated by passing it off to somebody else, insurance, which is not a free ride.
Why no?
Someone's paying for this.
Everybody pays for it.
Exactly.
Everyone, the collective
everybody.
society does.
Exactly. Especially in, say, let's take the club, the insurance club. All right, and that's club when you get right down to it. There's an equalization of payments across all of the people who have insurance policies.
Oh yeah, risk pools. It's all common. Yeah.
Exactly. It's common. It's a common approach. And so you just find this, I think, very, very interesting. Well, it's actually the solution raises issues that need to be looked at. And I'm not saying the solution is wrong. I'm saying that every solution has ramifications.
Yep.
And so when we think of responsibility, and that's when we think of preparedness and we are responsible, every action has a equal and concomitant reaction.
Yep.
There's no such thing as just working and living in isolation and making decisions in isolation. All of our decisions have impacts. And speaking of the fob, just as an aside, in our building, I live in an area that's fairly wealthy. Not that I'm wealthy. I keep telling everybody I just live there. I just don't, I don't have.
I bought in early.
Yeah, I don't have a $15 to $25 million mansion in, like Drake does down the street from where I live in Toronto. Yes, he does live down the street. But what's fascinating in our little building, which has a fairly old population living in it, we are considering converting the entire security system to a fob system. And I wrote to the board saying, okay, folks, I just want us to understand that I have no problem with fobs and all that, but I strongly suggest we keep one ground level door, key operated. Raised the question, why would you do that? It's kind of counter to having it all electronic and fob. I said, well, it has nothing to do with somebody copying the fob capability or whatever, stealing its capability, if you will. It's because we live in a blackout area. And they said, what? I said, yes, in this tiny little area of very wealthy Toronto,
yeah,
the hydro system has not kept up with the building process. So there are very large buildings, very large mansions that have drawn on the hydro system where the relay box, that's what I'll call it, that's located over there, is about 800 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the summertime, when everybody's doing air conditioning, guess what happens? Okay. It cuts out. It could be for an hour. It could be for 12 hours. Now, I want you to think about it. If the only way to get into the building is with a fob, and it's run electronically because it needs to, because it's an IT system.
Yep.
how do you get in the building when the electricity cuts out? Oh, we better think about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Funny how that works, right? And
Funny how that works,
yeah,
so there's the one side of, fobs are now a universal communication system that some hacker can actually mimic, replicate, and probably even replace, right?
yeah.
In order to steal your car.
Or to do whatever. And this is why I say in the world of preparedness, I've simplified it to a very basic question: is what does your world look like without access to X?
Mm-hmm.
And you can insert anything for X: bananas, fobs, TV,
Exactly.
internet.
Exactly.
And if the answer to that question is not much, then great. You never have
Yep.
to worry about that again.
Yep.
And the answer is not going to be the same for everybody. So when you live in a building like that and you're like, okay, not being able to get into my home, that's pretty impactful. We can't
Oh,
have that.
yes.
Not having access to air conditioning for a couple hours in Toronto.
Yeah.
Do I need to install a battery backup system in my apartment to ensure I can run air conditioning without hydro? That probably is not necessary, right? But
No.
if you're on the 20th floor
Ah,
and you have medical needs to certain controlled
yes.
environments, then
Yes.
the answer to that would be yes, I do need to have a
Yes.
battery backup. But
Yes.
those are individual answers. So it's
Yes.
looking, the idea of the preparedness lens is just looking through changes in technology, changes in processes, changes in the way you're doing life, your
Yes.
life, how you choose to
Yeah.
do it. Looking through the lenses, when I lose access to the latest shiny thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what can I do? And this is why still in the Army today, they teach map and compass.
Yes.
Now, everything is not only on GPS. The
Yes.
GPS the Army uses is crypto enabled.
Yeah.
So it's enabled by high speed, encrypted communications that the
Yeah.
enemy can't hack and mess with.
Right.
That's GPS is also run on that as well.
Yeah.
But every soldier can use map and compass
Yes.
because we can't have a situation where a
Yeah.
basic function is lost
Yeah.
without access to technology. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as we advance society and as we replace previous menial tasks with simplicity, we have to remind ourselves that some of these tasks still need to be able to be delivered and conducted without the technology in the unlikely event that that technology fails. And we have to think ourselves through, what does that world look like? And that's the strategy, right? That's
Yeah.
not buying things, that's not purchasing systems. It's about thinking through, saying, hey, I'm ready for the 4 or 5 things that, based upon how I look around this world, would actually impact me
Yeah.
and how I run my life. So I've categorized them. I've come up with a strategy to deal with them. I've addressed it. So
Yeah.
now my stress level comes down, my
Yeah.
anxiety comes down. And as the bumps in the roads in the world keep happening,
Yeah.
not much concerned,
Yeah.
because the things I rely on and the things that are critical to how I conduct my life have redundancy built in. I've created redundancy. And so we're okay.
If we on an everyday basis, without necessarily, driving ourselves crazy with paranoia,
Yeah.
think of the everyday as the VUCA reality. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Okay, those are big issues. And so often enough when we think of volatility, we think in terms of the headlines in a news report. All right. Uh, the potential, for example, of the Middle East blowing itself up in the next few weeks, or this um, oil platform blowing up and then sinking into the sea, taking everybody with them. Those are the big issues. But volatility isn't always big stuff. And it raises the question, what do we need to be prepared for? All right. If we relegate our thinking just to the big things that will never happen here, then I think we lose not only perspective, but context. Calgary just had a hailstorm that left several inches, I'm going to use inches, forget centimeters, of hail all over the place on the ground. And it's August, folks.
Yep.
It looked like a snow piling up. And you go, what the hell is that? And is that reality? Yes.
Yep.
Is it abnormal? Well, okay, we can go down that rabbit hole as to what's normal and what's abnormal. A Chinook in February coming out of the mountains in Calgary that raises the temperature to 25 degrees. Is that normal or is that abnormal? Just drop the language as to whether it's normal or abnormal. It's reality. And so the question is, what do we need to be prepared for? We had a heat wave here. Things are very difficult. They have a heat wave in India. Is it the same? No. We live somewhat luxuriously. We have lots of capability, even if it's a fountain outside in the park where we take the kids and they're in the water, which in some senses you can't do in other parts of the world. We often enough are comfortable in our everyday to the point where the unexpected is a shock. And the unexpected should not be a shock anymore. And I'm not talking about climate change. I'm not talking about the big picture, the world's going to come to an end and all of my children and their children are going to have a horrible thing and they're not going to be able to breathe. Okay, fine. I can't predict that. Yes, do the numbers and projections indicate that is a possibility? Okay, maybe I'm being completely selfish by saying I'm dying. I'm going to be dead anyway. It's their problem. Well, actually, it isn't. It is our problem. Nonetheless, there are these everyday issues that we face that we have to figure out what we're going to do about it. And by the way, when we say prepared for, it's as if we have a stockpile somewhere. That's precisely what we're not talking about. It's a mindset. It's a lifestyle.
I just call it, another way to look at it is mental agility, your ability to be agile, right?
Exactly.
You see that in supply chains.
Yeah.
Agile supply chains are ones that have a little bit more stock along the different, but they have the ability to react, manage, carry on, address, and keep delivering their requirements. So what we've become is our grandfather and our grandmother were far more capable for dealing with the punches upside the head that society and the weather and life would throw at you than today's. We're very much live in a protected environment and very much where we have a dependent on somebody else providing us for our systems of life, right? We don't grow our own food. Corporations feed us. We don't, and I like to say farmers feed us. No, farmers sell their stuff to corporations. It's the corporations who deliver their stuff to us. Corporations feed us, right?
Yeah.
And we can go on and on about all the systems that generations ago we used to provide for ourselves as human. They've now transferred. So we are less and less capable of providing for ourselves and becoming more and more dependent on an external entity to provide and provision of support.
Yeah.
And the difficulty in that is that the collective can't do it.
Yes.
In significant events. They simply can't. The ratio of first responders to residents here in Ottawa is about 5,500 to 1 on duty. In a significant event, they will be overwhelmed in a matter of minutes, and there won't be anybody to help anybody because they'll simply be overwhelmed. what do people do at that point? Do you panic about it? No. Humans have been navigating these type of things
Yeah.
forever. So
Yeah.
the essence is, the idea of the lifestyle is, you accept, and a bit of a stoic philosophy, you accept the fact that there are exogenous shocks that are going to happen
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
These are things that are beyond your control. You don't initiate them, you don't control them, and you really can't control the impacts. What you can control is what you choose to do
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
your life is impacted. And if you are reasonably mentally agile and understand that balling yourself up in the corner and getting angry that something happened or upset does not help you navigate the situation,
No. Yeah.
and that you navigate, and social capital, the power of that means Victor doesn't have to navigate this on his own.
Yeah.
Victor's community
Yes.
is navigating the shock together,
Yes.
sharing the human capital, the physical capital, the
Yep.
financial capital, all based on those trusted relationships. You become more resilient. And to
Mhm.
use the scientific definition of resilience, it's the ability of an object to absorb external forces
Yes.
and stay at rest. And
Yes.
if knocked off of a state of rest, it's how fast the body can return to a state of rest.
Yes. Yeah.
Collectively, we're successful.
Yeah.
Independently, we're not.
Yeah.
It's
No,
just,
I agree. I
it's the
agree.
power, it's
Yeah.
the power of social capital. It's the
Yeah.
power of our
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. To put this, as we're coming to the end, put this into a framework is I've been thinking about preparedness, resilience, and the need for persistence as part of it. Um, and when I think about persistence, I see it as a skill. People often enough think of it as an idea or an ideal or a virtue or even a quality. Okay, that's a little too vague. Persistence is a skill set, and it has a framework. And there are 5 dimensions that I think about, and I put it in terms of, and maybe it's because I'm a crazy man, in terms of building muscles. Right, as if I were someone who went to the gym to build muscles. So there's the
In your
irony.
younger years.
Yeah, there it is. There's the irony right there. And for me, there are 5 different sets of muscles that we have to build as the skill set for being persistent in terms of the lifestyle, being prepared. Right. One is the headspace muscle. The headspace muscle is about setting goals. It's so what do you want out of life? Right? We could call it, I call it a way of life. You call it a lifestyle. Okay, that's somewhat semantic differences. It's really, what's your why,
Yeah.
to use that term? And
Yeah.
that's your headspace muscle. All right. Then there's your self-confidence muscle. All right. How do you stay positive in the worst of possible situations when the shizzy hits the fizzy or whatever the hell you call it?
That's right.
Okay. I mean, how do we actually say, I'm not going to surrender?
Yeah.
Right. Do I believe in myself? Do I believe in my abilities? Do I believe in my capabilities and my capacity in order to get through this crap? Right. And that's the self-confidence muscles. You have to build those muscles.
Yep.
That's not something that just automatically happens. Because that's what I like about the muscle analogy here, is that you have to make this happen. You have to do something.
And you
The
maintain.
third is the active or activation muscles. You've got to do something. Okay. Your muscles don't just happen. You have to do something. You have to identify the steps that you need to take in order to ensure that you will survive, that you will get through, that you are prepared. And you also have to recognize that you have to do this with incremental ways, because you can't eat the elephant all at once.
No.
You have to take it step by step. What is your critical path in the event that You may want to do some scenario planning, but it's still, you have to figure out what is it that you're going to do? What do you need? What do you think you need to do? And that's about building that muscle, your action muscle. The fourth one is your bouncing back muscle. And bouncing back is something you have to develop as a muscle, right? It's about learning from failure, learning from constraint, learning from limitations. So, when you quoted this person saying, all of my neighbors are my enemies, or my neighbor is my enemy. Okay. To me, immediately, I thought, oh, that's a fear mechanism. This person's afraid of a lot of things, not just the people sitting, living in the house next to them. And my immediate response is, and by the way, I don't like all my neighbors, so that's it. It's now out in public. None of us likes. It's not about liking them. It's about recognizing that you have neighbors. Okay, and so it's taking that negative, recognizing it's not about like, and I really don't like you, and saying, so if in the event that, whatever that is, what are the opportunities the two of us or three of us or 10 of us need to exercise and deal with? It's about taking the negativism and recognizing that there's a need to explore opportunities. So picking up on what you said. And my last muscle group, the fifth one, is the people muscles. It's surround yourself with people.
Yep.
Right. And it's the people that the inside of your circle, and it's the people who you need in order to survive. Where is the help coming from? Right? Unless you are living on the third floor of a condominium, you actually grow your own vegetables. You need the grocery stores in your neighborhood.
Yep.
Period. All right. And that's how you surround yourself with people, is recognizing that none of us, I don't care if you're off the grid and living alone, unless you really have the intention of becoming the Unabomber, you're still going to need connectivity. Where are your seeds coming from? Are you going to live off of the forest? Okay, even there. There's a great book written by one of my favorite historians, Simon Sharma. And he talks about forests. He said, in this day and age, after so many millennia, forests exist because we humans decide what is a natural forest and what isn't. It's a human decision. Right? And so it's never us alone in isolation, no matter how much we want to be that inner circle survivalist kind of person.
Because for a lot of people, it's easier to just try to go it alone than the difficulty of trying to navigate and exist within a group and all of the social challenges that provides.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, some people will make the decision that it's just easier for me to try to go it alone. But when you go it alone and isolate, it becomes a far more difficult place to go. And we've measured this. I mean, it's about human connectivity, and it's about those muscles that you mentioned have been true for millennia. Like, absolutely, without a doubt. You get up every day, you're chasing a dream. If you're just consuming oxygen, as we used to call them, oxygen thieves in the Army, people who just wander around aimlessly, pointlessly existing. You don't have to work all that hard to be better than the current crowd. Right? You really don't.
No.
If I say to my kids, I said, and I steal a bit of some of Jordan Peterson's 12 rules of life. And one is like, just chase something, pick it. If you get halfway down the road and it turns out it's not what you wanted, you're halfway ahead of where you were before.
Exactly.
Right? Pick something and go for it. Like, I retired from one career. I'm 53. I started another career. Okay. I don't know where this is going to go, but I most certainly have a road I'm I created, the strategy I created, the roadmap I laid out, and I'm traveling down that road and taking all the hits that go. But just like you said, because I have that roadmap, I am far less susceptible to all of the exogenous shocks that are happening.
Yeah.
Because to be successful, I need people. I want people. I want to be surrounded by like-minded people.
Yeah.
I want to be surrounded by a community. And because I build a tribe, I'm there for members of my tribe, just like they are there for me.
Yeah.
So now I've created a common group of people that will assist each other. And this is what we've done for millennia as a species.
Yes. Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
and you could see right from when Dr. Putnam started his research in the 1950s, there's been this switch from collectivism, not in the Soviet socialist
No.
sense, but collective ideology to individual ideology that we've been going through for the last 70 years or so. At the very same time, we've been rolling out the most influential technologies in the human existence. And which is why people forget that, Darwin adaptations in the species, they take 1,000 years. But we're making 1,000 years worth of change in a fortnight. And we still require all of the connectedness that makes our human species example. And that's why when I define success, it's not the bank accounts, because you're right. The billionaires are scared the pitchforks are out for them. And rightfully so. But the point is that you and I define success. You and I define success, what it means for us.
Yeah.
But from an outward looking point, when I'm a social scientist and I look at success, social connectedness is at the top of the list of things that I look for.
Yeah. Well, to bring this to my final comment, I described myself a little earlier as an extroverted introvert, or an introverted extrovert, depending on the day of the week.
Yeah.
One of the things that it's almost, well, it is intentional. It wouldn't be otherwise. I mean, I like being alone. I like living alone.
Yep.
I like my own company. This is very different from just being alone.
Oh, hugely different.
Yeah, you
absolutely.
have to actually like your own company. Okay. Yet I don't feel I'm isolated, and I don't think I've been bored or lonely for more than 5 minutes in my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not a model that I think people should emulate, but I am saying, you don't actually have to be only in the club, right? But you do have to recognize that your world automatically is bigger than the narrow focal point that you consider the absolute of who you are. You are not who you are simply because you are you. You are who you are because of your connections to
and your network,
everything around you. Right?
Yep.